So before I get started, I want to give you a few logistical tips about how my presentation is going to go. I pulled together a bunch of random images from the rallies that I've participated in, and then because I do a lot of blogging on Tumblr, I asked the people that followed my blog to submit photos that, for them, epitomizes community activism. So towards the end, you're going to see a lot of photos from that. But before all of that greatness, I used to always be the person that casually took a seat in the company of chaos, but the thing here is that as I was taking that seat, I would always be the person with the mouth running at 60 miles per hour, and it won't stop. And then I'm in the seat, and I'm still yapping, but I still haven't done anything. And then in January of 2009, my life completely changed, and I no longer lived as the person who took a seat. I met an amazing group of people so plugged in, so angry, so passionate, and so human to the causes that they believed in. And then I started asking myself the question, well, why didn't I ever stand up before? And I realized that I was a consenting victim to the apathetic wave that consumes our society. And when we think about apathy, we don't typically think about action. We don't think about what it does, yet it is one of the things that motivates us not to do. And it motivates us to believe that we as people, part of this society and every other society, have no effect on it. But apathy, though, travels down two roads. The act of inaction is action. But the real question here, though, is where does this apathy come from, and why do we allow for it to be the box that we rest so comfortably in? And I do have answers to both of those questions. We are negligent to the identities of others, and not only are we unaware of those existences, we're unaware of our inherent connections to other people. No one person is just a person. We carry around backpacks full of things that identify us, full of things that we care about, and full of things that affirm our claim to this world. And not often do we examine our own personal experiences as also the experiences of others. If we look at this from a social justice standpoint, because that's really all I am, when we are apathetic, when we are silent, we are ratifying the misfortune of others. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, why should I? And that was the same question I had 2 years ago when I started this advocacy work. Well, when you don't do for others or for the collective whole, you take away from yourself, and that complex really is just a paradox. Well, if I'm not doing for others, don't I just get to keep for myself? Well, no, because doing for others in any scenario, it can be as simple as speaking out about the things that you dislike or about the things that you support. When you care about something, or even when you don't, but I'm sure that you do in some form or another, you must act. It's like sitting at a dinner table and telling your group of friends that you really don't care what they order, but you really do. How many times do you find yourself in that situation, and how many times do you reflect on it and think, well, maybe I should have spoken up. Maybe I wasn't the only one. And you probably weren't. Mary Sue probably didn't like the rock-hard roast beef either, or she simply sat out on it. She may be a passive vegetarian or a new friend to the group, but your silence there made her silence feel isolated. And of course, the most pressing issues in our society aren't about ordering from a menu or chipping your tooth on roast beef, but we can find a parallel there. We're humans, and we're all sitting at the same dining table. We're all hungry. We all think the host is pretty cute. And if we have the ability to reserve a seat for ourselves, we have the responsibility to get a seat for another person. When one person is eating, while 9 are not, how enjoyable is that meal? When I started organizing heavily in my community, doing speeches here and there, making presentations, organizing rallies, and at times staying up to 1 a.m., 2 a.m. For strategy sessions, I started asking myself the question of, why do I still do this? Why is that I continue to try to bring oceans to our deserts, and why is that even after failures? Because we had those, because I had those, because sometimes no matter how hard we tried, a senator would refuse to sign on to legislation, my school would refuse to acknowledge my gay-straight alliance, or states like Georgia, Alabama, and even North Carolina try to write hate into our state laws. I've gotten pretty angry a lot of times. I'm actually always pretty angry a lot of times. But I've also been upset a lot, and I've cried plenty of times, but at the same time, I've rejoiced a lot. I've laughed a lot, and I've smiled a lot, not because of our successes, because we had those too, but more because I found small slots in the day where I found out a little bit more about myself, I found out a little bit more about the people that I care about, and I found out a little bit more about this world's ability to transform. And you learn that it's okay to be you, just as I learned that it's okay for me to be queer and loud and proud and still hold on to my Vietnamese heritage, and that I should never be subjected to bias because of those identities. I learned that it's okay for me to be a person of color and a working class individual at that, and that the inequity I experience in our economy and in our school systems will not be permanent. I learned that it's okay for me to learn about my histories and the histories of others because we're more connected than our teachers ever taught us. I've gained all of that just by doing all that I can for others. How sustainable is our society, our most intimate relationships, or our most distant ones, if we fail to recognize that with every inhale and exhale that we take, we inhale and exhale the identities of each other. We fill the brims of our lungs with the responsibility for one another. And the only way that you're going to keep living is of course, if you keep breathing. And the only way that you can continue to humanize your breath is to release the apathy of your inaction. Care for others as much as you care for yourself, and others will care for you. I'll keep going because I must, because we must, because there's no such thing as living for yourself. And even if you think that you don't owe it to yourself, well, darn, you owe it to everyone else. So, before I go, I want to leave everyone here with one of my favorite memories, even though the background information is not all that pleasant. Last year, we, as a nation, experienced what the media called a suicide epidemic. Young people were taking their lives because they were being severely bullied and no one was responding. An organization that I work with here in Charlotte, Time Out Youth, that works with lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender young people, along with other Charlotte-based organizations, put together an It Gets Better vigil. And I had the awesome opportunity to speak at that vigil. I spoke to several hundred people jammed into a tiny church parking lot, and I was able to release all the really stressing emotions that I had from my own experiences with bullying and the frustration I have with a society that refuses to be proactive, but instead is reactive. And I went into that speech not expecting anything for myself. All I hoped was to inspire others and empower others to transform and change this world. And so I did my thing, and then I wrapped up, and I walked into the crowd, and it was erupting with thank yous. People were giving me hugs, people were telling me stories, and I was used to all of that. But still, their gratitude for my existence, essentially, completely overwhelmed me. And I realized that in that moment, my identities are so intertwined with the identities of others and theirs with mine, that even when I try not to do, I always will. So this is what I want to leave you with. Go out there and do something. Do it for me. Thank you.